Hey everybody, it's time for Retro Trekkers! Boom!
Oh, Retro Trekkers. Get down with the retro. Retro Trekkers. Captain John and Commander Joe. Retro Trekkers. We love our Star Trek. Retro Trekkers. The nerd muscles get the facts. Retro Trekkers. Get down with the retro. Retro Trekkers. Let's get it done.
Woo, yeah!
Retro Trekkers. Jumping back with the
All right, time for Retro Trekkers, the show where a couple of old dudes who love Star Trek are recapping and reviewing Star Trek episodes. Hopefully they're episodes that you've seen recently, but if they're not, we always recap it, so you remember that. We have the beats. That's a great way of recapping it. And, you know, the beats are... Oh, my God, I hit the wrong button. That's ridiculous. Anyway, I'm Captain John, and of course, the man that makes me the captain, well, that would be the first officer of SB-80, our proud space station, Commander Townsell. Welcome aboard the bridge, sir.
Captain Weber, thank you, sir. It's going to be a great one tonight. And you know, the hardest part of me preparing for this episode was trying to make a where no man has gone before joke, but I can't think of any place where at least some man hasn't gone before. I'm just going to have to leave it at that. As a matter of fact, thinking about that kind of gave me the willies from time to time.
There are a lot of ways that man has done that. And now, of course, we say where no one has gone before, but we are talking about the original Star Trek. And oh boy, this is a really important episode where no man has gone before. As a matter of fact, this one, I believe. This one deserves the old Genesis. So we should really talk about how this one came about. Now, where we are in Star Trek history at this point is, correct me if I'm wrong, 1965?
1965, because it was filmed in that year and then aired a year later.
Right. And this one is filmed for an extremely interesting reason, and that is because this one has to be the pilot that works, seeing as though the first pilot, the Cage, did not work.
Nope.
Now, let's talk about some of those reasons why it did not work. Do you remember I remember one or two. I can pick up the ball, but I am trying to stop dominating the show as much. That's actually something I'm trying to do.
Well, listen, I mean, the succinct 2-word explanation, which is time honored at this point, it was too cerebral.
Yes,
exactly. Not enough action, too much thinking man stuff. You know,
exactly. Yeah. Raphael, thanks for being with us, man. And with that in mind, NBC was extremely reticent. They were very reluctant to say yes to a second pilot. However, it wasn't going to be their money that was going to pay for it. In this case, they were saved by our goddess, that red-headed wonder, Lucille Ball.
Lucy?
Now, Lucy and her husband, Desi Arnaz Sr., had their own studio based on all of the success they had through their camera show, their four-camera show, I Love Lucy, which pioneered so many things for television and was such a big hit. And so now they had Desilu Studios. They had a few good shows. Mission Impossible was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember any others right offhand. I know there were a couple of good ones.
Well, I think at that time where that's the bulk of it, you know, the most important two.
Yeah, but because those are the ones that, you know, especially nowadays, they lasted. Everything that was interesting about them is still very, very interesting. And what they were doing with, that Raphael's right. Untouchables was one of them too.
But prior, so again, for the late 60s, I think those are the big two. But yes, absolutely, Untouchables prior to that.
Big part of their success, certainly. you know, and with their success, somebody over there could save the show if they wanted to. And hey, Josh is with us. Hey, Josh.
Joshua.
Good to see you, man. The saving of the show could only be done by two people in this case, either Desi Arnaz Sr. or Lucy. And Lucy did believe in this show. And she did say, I will lay out the money, even though it's going to be really expensive because A, it's a TV show. You're doing a second pilot. Do you remember offhand any other shows that have had to shoot a second pilot? Like I can think of modern shows.
Well, I was going to say, I think since then there's been a number of them, maybe even three. Three's Company comes to mind. There was, All in the Family.
I didn't know that. I did know about Big Bang Theory. That had more than one pilot.
Right. But I think I'm pretty certain in this is that Star Trek was the first to get more than one pilot to attempt to sell the series.
Could be. Now, granted, with a second pilot, they had a problem. They needed a new captain for the ship because Jeffrey Hunter, who played Captain Christopher Pike in the first one, the first pilot, died in a car wreck.
Yeah.
And with that, they had to go searching. This is probably the other guys they were looking at for the show. They actually offered the show to two other guys. Do you have that, Joe, in your tidbits? Because if you do, I can wait till the end.
No, actually, I do not. So please share.
It is my great pleasure to put in your head Captain Kirk, Captain James Kirk, we'll say for now.
Middle initial pending.
Exactly. Captain Kirk was offered to Lloyd Bridges.
But was he still sea hunting?
I don't know. But
not.
You have to consider that Sea Hunt was an extremely popular show. People really loved it. So his flinty young, by now my lungs were bursting for air. Like that es muy macho, Lloyd Bridges, that would have been a good choice. Do you know the second guy they offered it to? I
have a feeling it's not a Lloyd Bridges type.
Da, 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 da. Jack Lord.
My goodness.
Oh, something? That's right. Yeah, actually, Josh, you're absolutely right. Lucy is one of the main reasons we even have Star Trek. That is absolutely true. Gilligan's Island. Raphael's actually right about that. There was a second pilot to Gilligan's Island.
Yes, there was. And so I stand corrected. That would have predated this.
The first pilot, which never aired, was called Marooned, but the one they used was called Two on a Raft. That's really cool. That's very cool. Well done, Raphael.
Yes, and of course that releases the floodgates for me. I mean, that was where we had no Ginger Marianne. We had Bunny and Bethany, the secretaries, whatever their names were.
Right. Yeah. Gosh, I know I saw it like in college, but that was a long time ago.
Yes, it had its differences. So I'm glad they rethought it with the girls at least.
Then they go to William Shatner. Sorry, boy, I had a hard time finding that name. Then they go to William Shatner. William Shatner is very well known at that point. He's been on The Defenders. He's been on a lot of TV. He, of course, was huge in Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone, absolutely.
Very, very interesting, extremely interesting actor. And I have to say, as much as I try to play out Lloyd Bridges, who I think would have been a solid choice. And oh man, Jack Lord would have been really good.
Well, I think it's one of those rare roles. I mean, this was basically Pike reimagined to some extent, anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, if in a parallel universe, maybe one or both of those gentlemen played the character and did it fabulously and stood the test of time. But of course, we have Shatner, so that's okay too.
Honestly, the Shatner story is one of the best. So I can't say that I'm complaining. I certainly am not.
Now, I do have on good authority,
Yes.
through the grapevine that as much as we admire Lucille Ball for helping to save Star Trek, she did have a kind of a precognitive motive involved, and that is she probably realized that maybe 40 years later, people will be creating memes with her in a gorgeous, sexy red mini dress. So she's like, I want to see that if I can live long enough. So
One of the greatest things in the world is putting a redhead in red.
she looks
You
stunning.
wouldn't-
One of the ones I've seen.
You wouldn't think it works. You wouldn't. There's actually a joke from 30 Rock about, oh God, who is the actress? She's just so beautiful.
Tina Fey.
Well, Tina Fey is very beautiful.
What you're thinking of?
I'm thinking of the movie actress who did the show. She was Jack Donaghy's love interest, red hair. She was in she was in The Big Lebowski. Mr. Lebowski, do you like intercourse? Oh gosh, someone can name her.
Sure.
There's a whole bit about how she's wearing red underwear, and you wouldn't think it would work so well with her red hair, but it works incredibly. Anyway,
Yeah.
so far off the beaten path here.
Now listen. Just let me point out too that despite our recent trilogy, Trials and Titillation, as well as the other, spicy, sexy stuff we talked about on Retro Trekkers, I think that's the first use of the word intercourse on this show.
I think you're right. We usually try to keep it clean, but now that we're on 7 p.m. on the West Coast,
Yeah,
we're going so blue.
Retro Trekkers After Dark.
Oh, wait till you hear about this Sunday show for Retro
Oh.
Rangers. But anyway, moving on.
Yeah, that was not an accidental drop there.
You are a promo genius, Mr. Townsville. I have
thank you,
always
sir.
said so. Anything else we want to talk about the setup here? Oh, I did want to throw this in. This is one of those episodes because it is so near the beginning of the entire show, the entire creation of the franchise. I would say when you watch like the first 5 or 6, you're getting so much Gene Roddenberry.
Oh, of course, yeah.
He had that idea of a wagon train to the stars,
Mm-hmm.
which actually I found out he stole that from a writer friend of his who gave him that idea.
Well, I'm not surprised. And look at how many of the lead actors were very prominent in westerns just prior to this. So,
Yes.
I'm sure that was an influence on getting cast.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm going to throw a tidbit in at the beginning, yet another one. I just read this today. I never knew this before. NBC was really not so sure about this show, so they had to be very specific about which one they were going to choose. Now, you remember the other episodes they were considering being the very first episode, even though this was the first one they shot with Shatner.
Right.
They were going to present them out of order. And one reason why was because this episode they felt had too much exposition.
Well, it was again some kind of that a little bit too cerebral, but what saved it was the fist fight. Spoilers.
Exactly. They loved the brawling. They loved the violence. I mean, I remember when I first saw it, and we will talk about the laser rifle, but they liked the guns. They liked the laser rifle. They liked all the stuff I like, frankly.
Well, and again, so it was enough of a reassurance on the second pilot to sell the series, but they were still reluctant to have it air first, despite the fact it would present continuity errors later. That's why we saw Mantrap, Salt Vampire, and Charlie X, Psycho Teenager. That's why we saw them first.
Yes. Excellent point. And brought up by both you and Raphael. And it felt like an NBC show. And I get that. Because at those times, it was still very male-dominated television. The entire language of what you were getting from television could be very action-dominated, westerns provided that. So for this to be a pseudo-Western, that's great. However, this is a very strong one for it being a pseudo World War II naval show.
Yeah.
One of the things, there's all this stuff about the ship and the crew and all that, but one of the things that I thought was so funny was how the character of Mr. Spock is like calling out, like, deflector shells on.
Just 20 years ago.
Now, granted, you do that on a ship, but do you do that in an enclosed area? I mean, you do that on board a long ship, sure, but I thought
Spock, that's hurting my ears. Must be hurting yours.
Exactly. I mean, it's so funny that things from like Mutiny on the Bounty are showing up in Star Trek, where no man has gone before, but here we are.
Well, it's interesting too, and we're getting a little down and dirty, but that's okay. We'll come back and forth, but very, very quickly, because it was only at the beginning, but we saw people in their civilian clothing, which we later saw in the other series.
Oh yeah.
Not so much on this one after these first episode or two, really.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, like look like they're teenagers. So I think he was really wanting to push that city and space aspect too, but had to do it subtly because again, it kind of delved back into that thinking man's trope.
Yeah. They do introduce the idea that not everybody on the ship is military,
Mm-hmm.
that some of the characters are there because they are science and they're not directly Starfleet. And that, of course, would continue all through the series. Joshua brings up a great point. Someone once said that Trek is essentially Horatio Hornblower in space.
Yep.
And, if that wasn't the original intention, I certainly think that's where they ended up, because it was so much about the captain and his two friends, the first officer and the doctor.
Well, Roddenberry may have been referring to this after the fact, but he himself drew that comparison.
Oh, it's so great. Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get to really one of the best parts of Retro Trekkers. Every week, Mr. Townsell puts together a recap that we call the Beats. And this week, well, it's no exception. He has made yet another brilliant Beats for us, and here we go.
Retro Trekkers from Star Trek, the original series, where no man has gone before. No one. Kirk and Spock are chilling over a friendly game of chess.
It looks
Well, that is until the illogical Kirk beats his normally stoic Vulcanian first officer. Leave it to early Spock to poo-poo the captain's Earth emotions, attributing feelings to a planet instead of a species, while he himself is growing more irritated. Oh, get over yourself, Spock. We have work to do. Come on. Kirk's buddy, Gary Mitchell, meets him at the turbolift, ready to mingle with that cute little blonde yeoman on the bridge. The USS Enterprise is near the edge of the known galaxy. It encounters an antiquated ship recorder from the SS Valiant, a vessel that disappeared 200 years ago during the same mission to penetrate the galactic barrier. Oh, get your minds out of the gutter. The galactic barrier is a long, narrow purple strip of gas, which begs the question, why not just fly over or under this silly thing?
Or light
Talk about two-dimensional thinking.
Get a lighter.
Spock interprets the recorder's message. Turns out that the captain of the Valiant ordered self-destruct, trying to access info on humans with extraordinary extrasensory perception. You know it as ESP. The Enterprise's newly arrived psychiatrist, Dr. Elizabeth Daner, is summoned to the bridge. She comments on the abilities of humans with high Esper abilities, paving the way for Deanna Troy's annoying bouts of Betazoid empathy. But that's not important right now. Kirk brushes off Daner's analysis and makes a beeline for yonder galactic barrier. Inside the barrier, the Enterprise is jostled about, giving everyone their chance to stumble back and forth on the bridge. Then, the ship is spit out, like so much phlegm. Worse, 9 crewmen are dead, while both Daner and Mitchell are zapped. Finally, the poor starship has sustained heavy damage, marooning them at the edge of the galaxy. Time for an awkward gathering on the bridge with newbies Scotty and Sulu, who wonder about the fake doctor in their midst. Must be a temp while McCoy is on vacation. Mitchell is taken to the infirmary, where his puppy dog brown eyes have turned a disturbing shade of silver. Kirk discovers his dim-witted Starfleet Academy buddy, who majored in beer pong, and who's now zipping through the ship's library. Spock deduces that Mitchell must have taken the Evelyn Wood speed reading course. Kirk and Spock consult the ship's records to find that Daner and Mitchell scored the highest ESP ratings. Mitchell slowly begins to develop strange powers, such as mind reading, telekinesis, and clairvoyance. Spock sees that Mitchell is becoming colder and more ruthless. So much so that when Kirk gets a little mouthy and swaggers into sickbay, Mitchell zaps the captain across the room with the Emperor Palpatine fingertip lightning. Spock fears that Kirk's buddy will develop powers beyond imagination. So it's time to break out the big phaser rifle, since Mitchell may soon be swatting the crew like mosquitoes. Spock recommends that the Enterprise limp on impulse power to the planet Delta Vega, where a lithium processing station could help repair the ship's engines. The station is totally automated, so there's no other potential victims there. Spock's blunt recommendation? Maroon Mitchell. Either that or execute him. Kirk is dreading this unavoidable command decision. Either way, he's going to lose his drinking buddy. The Enterprise reaches Delta Vega. Mitchell sneers as he reveals he can read Kirk and Spock's mind and knows what they have planned. But somehow, they bonk Mitchell on the head and throw him into the brig on planetside. Kirk continues to struggle with what to do with Mitchell, even as he becomes more Q-like. Daner, in awe as she proposes they're all seeing human evolution in action. You know, she got zapped in the galactic barrier too. Maybe we should lock her up, just to be safe. Nah. While the Enterprise is under repair, Mitchell escapes. He kills Lieutenant Kelso and incapacitates Kirk and Spock. He takes Daner, now Silverite herself, to the hills of Delta Vega.
She's awfully pretty, too.
Two gods, ready to find their own Garden of Eden.
Oh, yeah.
Mitchell conjures up a couple of apples, and they celebrate by munching on the fruit. Kirk wakes up and goes after the pair, kicking himself for not killing Mitchell when he had the chance.
Managed to get your shirt off.
I told you so, said Spock. Mitchell senses Kirk approaching and sends Daner ahead to meet him. Kirk and Daner debate on what Mitchell has become. Daner tries to defend Mitchell, but Kirk appealed to the psychiatrist in her. Then Mitchell himself appears. Kirk shoots Mitchell with the phaser rifle, and he shrugs it off as if shooing a fly.
Do love that face.
Being very considerate to his old buddy, Mitchell prepares a freshly dug grave and a newly chiseled gravestone. Although there is a typo. I mean, who the hell is James R. Kirk? Daner sees the light and now admits that poor Mitchell is now drunk with power. He has become a glowing-eyed, telekinetic, murdering a-hole. Only one thing to do now. Daner zaps Mitchell with her own fingertip lightning. He zaps back, but Mitchell's power is drained and his eyes are normal again. Kill him while you can, Daner implores. Kirk ain't making the same mistake twice. He picks up a big rock, ready to bash Mitchell's noggin in, but the captain hesitates.
Oh, it's so
and
hard.
Mitchell's eyes glow silver once again. It's on, baby. Mitchell starts whooping Kirk's ass again, but the captain gets a hold of the phaser rifle. He blasts more loose rock above Mitchell's head and buries his buddy in the grave meant for Kirk. Daner shows remorse for her actions and, in her dying breath, succumbs to her injuries. Kirk returns to the Enterprise for a heart-to-heart with Mr. Spock.
Oh, very cool.
Captain's log documents that both Daner and Mitchell died in the line of duty. Spock admits that he, too, felt sorry for Mitchell, proving that he's not such a cold-blooded Vulcanian after all. Would somebody please tell that to Dr. McCoy when he returns next week?
Damn Vulcanian.
Meanwhile, little does anyone know. At the last moment, Gary Mitchell uses his powers to transport to a random point in Earth's past. He ends up in the year 2001 on board the Discovery. No, not that Discovery. Mitchell decides to blend in with the crew and catch a ride to Jupiter. I mean, what's the worst that could happen?
I love that ending.
Thank you.
It's so clear that Mr. Townsend is a great writer because he can retcon Star Trek into 2001. Man's a genius.
Well, but who's to say that Gary didn't, zap himself back in time as the rocks fell on him? It could happen.
It could happen. I'm going to do something incredibly unusual for a podcaster.
Yes.
So here's something we have. I'm not sure if I would pronounce it Indie Tiger, so I'm just going to say Tiger. I'm just nicknaming you Tiger. Did you say that there are civilians on the Enterprise in original Star Trek? Occasionally, sure, like when they're carrying ambassadors, but everyone normally on board are Starfleet. I'm going to take that note. Like most podcasters wouldn't, I will, because you're right. Dana is wearing a Starfleet uniform. She is Starfleet. She did just join the crew at this point as well.
Oh, sure. And again, it could go either way. I'm just making an assumption that may not be valid. But pretty much in that very first scene with them playing chess, you're seeing people walking around, very young kids walking around in kind of teenage clothing. Now, they could just be young crew member on their off-duty hours.
Right.
It sure had a vibe to me of being more than just a military ship, staffed by military personnel.
That's a good point. But except for like the guests who would come on board, the scientists who wanted to do their experiment or whatever. Mm-hmm. And we did have that conversation that in this episode, there seemed to be a when you're off duty, you can wear your regular clothes.
Yeah, well, thank goodness.
I mean, that's how it works in the real military. Although my friends are like, yeah, but you just go to your sweatpants and your Crocs. Like, you look ridiculous when you're going to be.
Look at my uniforms I'm going to wear at happy hour. Okay.
Well, as we like to do whenever we get to the end of the beats, we go down and dirty. Let's talk about what we liked. Let's talk about what we didn't like. We'll talk about what worked for you, what didn't work. This is really a great time for your opinions and your feelings. And, there was, okay, so we are having a little bit of an argument about that.
A little debate. That's nice.
We're all friends here. We're all debating. We all love the same things, including each other.
But as Chris points out, I mean, if that was the intention in this second pilot, we pretty much never saw it again. I mean, yes, we would see Starfleet personnel in their civilian clothes from time to time, but never, in my opinion, never was it attempted more just to see civilians living on the Enterprise.
Right. And what's really interesting about Next Generation is when they solidified that idea.
Right.
It was a much bigger ship.
Mm-hmm.
So it made sense if you were going to have a giant Viking cruise ship in space, what Galaxy class is pretty much, then you would bring your family. Also, there's the time differential. If you leave your family somewhere and then you travel away, time is different for you. Mm-hmm. So it's nicer to keep the family together. I've heard that argument made. I don't know if
Roddenberry said something going into Next Gen that deflates my argument a little bit, is that, that was kind of a new concept in Next Gen time. It wasn't really practiced on the more militaristic ships.
Right.
And you could also say that the number of people on the Enterprise D exceeding 1,000 is pretty much the crew of 450 or so with their families.
Yeah.
You typically you'd have a significant other, a child or children, and so forth. So I think this might have been an early attempt to maybe do that, but then just kind of didn't really take fruition until next gen came along.
I mean, it makes sense that they wanted to keep things exactly, Chris, the interstellar story. Exactly. It does make a lot of sense that the desire to have sort of an action military Starfleet, it does make it more of a warship, and that's cool. I mean, we got 3 really good seasons of this show doing that. So as the changes are welcome and cool, this original concept's really great.
Yeah.
Let's start getting down and dirty about the characters. So
Yes.
this is a different Doctor. Now, here's something that I only just recently heard. It's a little bit of a tidbit, but hopefully I'm not stealing one of yours, Townsend.
They are co-owned and supported.
Oh, let's see what Tiger's got here. My theory is Galaxy class was supposed to be a mobile starbase. That makes a lot of sense.
That's a great description. I would put it that way myself. Yes.
Yeah. Other smaller ships should have been attached to the ED. Yeah. That it just makes a lot of sense because there's so much on that ship, and that's great. That's how you know you're going to get 7 good seasons, because you keep your horizons very big. And you don't get too limited in how you look at things. What I loved about the Doctors in this one. So have you ever heard this story? Gene Roddenberry in The Cage wanted McCoy. He wanted Dr. McCoy, played by DeForest Kelley. He wanted DeForest Kelley. His director said, I know just the guy. And so the old fella, I don't have his name off the top of my head, who played the Doctor in The Cage was the director
or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the second time they do a pilot, which is this one, it's Shatner's first episode. They got this Doctor. Man, I don't know. I always thought of this Doctor as like the super drunk Doctor, even though I believe the guy in The Cage is drunk.
When Kirk is getting ready to go after Gary and Elizabeth in the desert or whatever, and there's Dr. Piper and no argument, Mark. You go on. He says, "No, okay, see you." I didn't really see a lot of resistance there. Stay behind and help his captain.
And there had been a moment where Roddenberry had said, I'm really I'm sorry. I look to the chat for inspiration and I get stuff like this. Chris says DeForest Kelley's father was a lumberjack, hence his name.
Okay.
He's such a sticky fella.
John Hoyt.
John Hoyt? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe he might be the first one. So Roddenberry had said, shooting this episode, he said, look, if this series gets picked up, by God, I'm getting DeForest Kelley. And again, this being early Roddenberry days, like the days where Roddenberry's really putting his imagination on our TV screens, I think he was absolutely right. DeForest Kelley is such a great Doctor. The other guys are fine. They'd be fine on other shows. But, DeForest Kelley really brought some pepper to this stew.
Oh, the old Southern Doctor.
The old Southern Doctor. And that level of confidence and that level of comfort. And he's charming. DeForest Kelley's got it all, man. Big DeForest Kelley fan.
Oh, same here. And but it is a little. I mean, of course, there's no way that people back then making these great shows were going to hypothesize or predict that John and Joe 55 plus years later would be, tearing it apart. But it does present for a little jarring experience when you're binging anyway.
Yeah,
you got McCoy. There's McCoy twice. Then suddenly there's so many different things, and then it's right back to normal the following week.
It's very strange how they did this, but I have to say, I don't know if this is everyone else's experience, but like my family and I, what are we watching right now? There was a show, what was it called? Found. It's on network TV right now. And we were watching it together, and it's awful. It's terrible.
Is this a sequel series to Lost by chance?
If only. If only. No, it's one of these, oh, we're just the local police. We don't know how to find people. Well, I do know how to find people, and the police are no good at this. And oh yes, we all believe you. Nobody's disagreeing with you because you're the hero of the show. And it's a terrible pilot. And so I get why Roddenberry shuffled the deck a little bit in looking for what was going to be the first episode of his series that was now signed to NBC, and that they decided not to go with this one, even though that's what this one was intended for, because they didn't want to go so hard on that exposition, because sometimes that just makes a pilot bad. And the first episode, how often have you watched a series where the first episode is really like the worst one?
Well, sure. I mean, no matter how prepared they are, I mean, they're just at the beginning of establishing, character settings and concepts and so forth.
Yeah. So, any other opinions anybody wants to get out about this before we go to our next segment? Yes.
One more. This might actually be a good segue to what you're referring to as far as the next segment. But I wish for the beats, I wish I could have found this. I just couldn't find a usable still anywhere. But in the earliest presentations of Where No Man Has Gone Before, the titles were different as well. Now we know they were in the cage, but the titles are actually set to resemble like a Quinn Martin type cop drama intro. Tonight's episode, Where No Man Has Gone Before, just like I do on Retro Trekkers at the beginning.
Right.
So it just, again, trying to meld those genres together a little bit to sell the show a little bit more easily, hopefully.
Apparently the original music was different too for this one.
No opening narration is primarily the big difference.
Yeah, that's a huge difference too. So they were trying lots of different things. I really like a lot of the decisions they made. There are certain things I wasn't crazy about. The little blonde girl on the bridge, who serves for no other reason than for Gary Lockwood to hold her hand while they're
John, that is actually, you provided the perfect segue to the tidbits, because I have something to say about in tidbit form. So let's do that if you like.
Let's jump to tidbits. We love the little trivial tidbits. We just love them. And one of the best person at finding them and giving them to us is our good friend, Commander Joe Townsville. Joe Townsville, it's time for Townsville's Tidbits. Of course, anybody can play. I play. Anybody in the chat can play.
I'm the administrator of tidbits. That's what makes it plural, or possessive, right?
Yeah.
But just to continue that point, the reason that poor girl was cast was strictly because Roddenberry wanted to hit on her.
Yes,
that is it. It was a non-part.
She didn't have a name. She didn't have a job. There was no reason for her to be there, except Gene Roddenberry's like, "Hey, baby, you want to be on?"
unless we think that Gene's more of a kind of a creepy guy, he wasn't involved with Majel just yet. I don't think.
No, I don't think so. But
now, he might have been involved in the show. I can't remember the timing.
Here's the thing. I think he was. Here's the thing. There is a Majel Barrett Roddenberry, or Majel Roddenberry Barrett.
Majel Barrett got me now. Majel Barrett Roddenberry.
Okay. Yeah. There is a story there, told by the network guys. They weren't top guys, but basically, she had been in the cage. She was number one. She was She was the first officer. And the world wasn't ready for that, said the network.
Well, apparently not, because if you remember her in that role, I can't go down to the planet with you. No, that's not a job for a woman. You stay here.
Now, what's What's really interesting is when she returned as Nurse Chapel, there was apparently a time when the network guys were watching the dailies and they're like, wait a minute, didn't we fire her? And allegedly everybody was like, Jane? And he's like, what? Did you hire that? Did you hire that girl you wanted to go to bed with? Maybe. So yeah. So the future Mrs. Roddenberry got back on the show. But you know, just like here's the thing. I never blame, and I know you feel the same way, Joe.
Yeah.
I never blame Nichelle Nichols. I never blame Majel Barrett. I don't blame anyone for sleeping with a producer. That's your choice. Sometimes it gets you a job. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it keeps you a job. And frankly, that's not how it's supposed to be. Go to HR. But yeah, there was a, oh, interesting. Okay. So Raphael's done our research for us. Thank you, Raphael. Thank you, Ensign. The series ran for 3 seasons until 1969. Gene and Majel would marry that year.
Although I'm sure they fooled around and, but if they're single, hey, if he can juggle Majel and himself at the same time, more power to him.
Hey, consenting adults are a good thing. I'm all about what consenting. Oh, well, Chris says, I never found Majel very attractive.
Not even as Laxwana.
I gotta admit, but I've always kind of liked the Cougars. I always liked her. No, I didn't like Loxana as a character, but I was always happy when Majel was on the show. And of course, I always had a thing for the computer, but that's just me. And no one else has to sign off on that.
Yeah, when Loxana talks to the computer, to go on the holodeck, I mean, basically watching, Majel Barrett talk to herself, that was cool.
That's really cool. That's like some inside baseball Star Trek love right there. Mr. Townsend, other tidbits?
Although she did not appear in this episode, she would have appeared in the first 2, then back for the 4th. Just a nice coincidence that Gary Lockwood and Nichelle Nichols both appeared on the Lieutenant, Roddenberry's previous series.
Right.
So there's that. So, a little bit of nepotism in a manner of speaking. When you get a pool of talent, you're going to use it. If you can avoid it. Yeah.
One of my favorite things about Star Trek, frankly, if they found somebody who worked, they would keep them. They would bring them back, give them another name, give them another job. But I always liked that about the show because not a lot of shows will do that. A lot of shows would go in the opposite direction and go, oh, well, the audience has already seen so-and-so, so they can't come back. Star Trek was never like that. And I think it was one of Star Trek's greatest strengths.
Oh, I mean, especially decades later, having an actor play 6, 7, 8, 9 characters, over the course of their runs.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Go ahead.
I had to point this out because it's a big part of the episode. This is the first example of, and it's what sold the series apparently, where Kirk did his patented shoulder roll over and fire the weapon.
Yes. Yes. To anyone who enjoys wrestling, that is known as the 3/4 roll.
Oh, okay. There you go.
There's a lot of sort of stage combat and stuff that that Shatner was really good at. And you got to remember, Shatner was Toronto's Hamlet. He was a great Shakespearean actor. He and his buddy Christopher Plummer were very good Shakespearean actors. They did lots of sword fights and lots of stage combat together. So, some very, very good education, physical education on there.
Look, we have something good here. Okay.
Yeah. Chris says, if you showed up on time, hit your marks, and do your lines, I'm thinking you got rehired. Well, there's a certain kind of acting that really worked well on this show too, and I think they usually get somebody like that.
Now, I made I'm sorry. Let's see what. Oh, McGear.
McGear is new. Welcome.
Yeah,
So glad to have you on the show. Did anyone else have the photo novel of this episode? I think I was barely aware that one existed. Have you ever seen it?
I don't recall. I definitely seen the photo novels, and they're just like McGear, describes here. It's basically a comic book with photos.
Right.
And they were great.
They were.
Oh, and I had a number of them at once upon a time, so I'm sure this must have been among them.
Absolutely. This was a visually very stunning episode. That goes without saying. There are a couple of things I like. I like the scene on the planet where I guess what do they do? They crack lithium?
It's a lithium cracking station. It's not dilithium yet. It's only lithium.
The single lithium.
The single
lithium.
Cracking it.
It's a beautiful planet.
Mm-hmm.
And what I loved about the planet was the skyline, which actually they took from the cage and reused. So
absolutely. This is the first. This is where we're kind of establishing really early on the whole planet hell concept of reusing terrains and sky colors and so forth. Exactly.
Yeah. And I also love the the line that Shatner says. It's written by Gene, so who am I kidding? I know that Gene approved this line, which was "Nobody here but us chickens," which is a line to a very old racist joke. but very well applied here. And I think, as a comedian, I love seeing stuff like that. It's like,
well, sure. And besides which, by then the phrases obviously changed meaning. And as Uhura would point out, it says, we're not bothered by that anymore. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, it's a moment in time.
It is.
And things have changed, and that's good. Let's see. Any other things that you like in the trivia department? Because I know.
Yes, I have one here that I think is worth mentioning. Now, this is a little speculative, but
yeah,
I kind of bent the truth a little bit in making fun of Kirk and Mitchell's relationship. He was actually his one of his academy professors. Kirk was to Mitchell,
right?
And to some extent, that he compared Kirk to a stack of books with legs, which I don't think we'd ever seen him described that way since. No. But in the course of that conversation, they do refer to that cute little blonde lab technician that Kirk almost married, that Mitchell pointed his way as a joke.
Right.
And a lot of people speculate that must have actually been Carol Marcus.
I think that's possible. And then who's the girl from Turnabout Intruder? Woman. Who's the woman from there? Because I thought for sure that timed out too, because he almost married her, did he not?
True. And character name escapes. I'm going to say Janice something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that, so there is historical evidence. The only thing that might point more toward the Carol Marcus, if that is indeed a reference to her, is that Star Trek Into Darkness kind of supports that theory.
Interesting.
Since Carol Marcus turns up on the Enterprise, but again, it's two different histories, obviously. But
Tiger tells us Dr. Janice Lester. Thank you.
Janice Lester, that's right.
Tiger also has a great tidbit. Roddenberry didn't know what lithium was. He didn't know it was a real thing at the time. We do have to talk about what life was like before the internet.
Well, you know what? Before there was Google, and I gotta say it, leading into another tidbit I was going to bring up, more of a goof really, but somebody along, Roddenberry must have written for Sulu, because he's here as a physicist for the only time, pretty much.
Right.
I think he has some of those duties still in Charlie X, but he describes a geometric, progression of Mitchell's power. Technically, it might be more accurate, and audience, please correct me if I'm wrong on pointing out this is wrong. But technically, it was probably more of an exponential progression, not a geometric one.
Interesting. I also love that, when they get all the department heads together, and he is physicist, so I guess he's, in science, he's in charge of physics. He says everything in terms of mathematic, reason, mathematically, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of early in that stereotype of like, we need super math. Let's get the Asian guy, but
well,
pretty
If it's a
good.
good quality, then why not perpetuate the stereotype if it's a good one?
I mean, that's a good stereotype. You don't want to hate that one.
And of course, it's hard to, again, we can't really get too much into the inconsistent wardrobe, look at Enterprise and so forth, because it was done earlier than the rest, although it aired third.
Yeah.
But this is probably the only episode where no crew members are seen wearing red tunics.
That's crazy because I just watched it, and you're absolutely right. I didn't see red anywhere in the uniforms.
It's hard to tell, but especially with color from back then, but it's actually blue, gold, and beige.
Right. The colors are always a little strange on Star Trek.
Yeah.
Sometimes to very good effect, but sometimes to strange effect. I know one of the tidbits that Memory Alpha had was that the walls in the infirmary are green. And
right.
That wouldn't happen again, apparently.
Well, not only that, but of course the view screen on the bridge is really designed to look like a 1966 color TV with the big, thick, rounded edges.
I like that style, but that's a style.
It is.
Any last things we want to say about this? The deep, as Raphael says, the deep dive tidbits and the deep fried tidbits.
Exactly. Raphael gets the scoop there. Color TV was new, as we've pointed out before. I mean, the reason for the multiple colors and the kind of the odd color placements on the walls and so forth was because color TV was official across the board in 1966.
It was a big selling point. We talked about this when we did Mud's Women a few weeks back. It was a big selling point to get in directors who really wanted to work in almost an abstract way with color, because the more color you could get into a show, especially a science fiction show, I think it's a big reason why NBC said yes to a science fiction show. Was we could really push some interesting colors and some very interesting soft focus and some really interesting visuals, and you see a lot of that in this one. And yes, actually, Chris, you're absolutely right. Color TV was new, so the colors were exaggerated. Well, very eloquently put. Chris is also a writer.
Absolutely, because at this point, I mean, a lot of your urban dramas are with those settings tend to be a little beige and gray and drab, even for color TV.
Yes, as I like to call it, the Jack Webb palette. And and as McGear says, you got to have those blue babes. Get me some more blue babes. Well, that is pretty much it for this episode. It was a good episode. If you haven't seen it, you might want to go back and there was one last thing I remembered that I loved, honestly, and that was the way he would look at the screen, Gary Lockwood. The way he would look at people. And it was because they made him wear these terrible contact lenses that had aluminum foil in them.
Yep.
And he couldn't see, so he had he was able to see from the bottoms, and that's why he twists his head so weird when he's talking and looking around. I also love that an evil superpower is speed reading.
Yes.
In the 60s, a speed reader, that man's a freak. We better watch out. He'll destroy us all.
But think how much more effective it is doing this than this.
Well, that's true too. Actually, that's a very theatrical approach. On camera, maybe you want to obscure your face a little bit, but the stage people are honestly like, nope, open it up. Everyone gets to see.
Well, we didn't get into MVPs this episode, but I have to give it to Gary. I mean, obviously he's the most important character in the story.
Yeah.
And I personally was waiting for years, okay, they brought back Khan. Great.
Yeah.
And anything's still possible. Of course, have to be recast. But why did we never see Mitchell again? I mean, I know he ended up on the Discovery in 2001, but he could have come back to the 23rd century.
He could have. He could have. Honestly, the guy had these wild powers, and he was left all alone. He was abandoned in space. And anyway, Raphael asked a great question. And if we're going to informally talk about MVPs, I think Sally Kellerman did a great job on this show.
I would have gone that direction too, but I went with the more obvious choice. But especially when you consider they yanked her out of that shower from the 407 7th, and
the woman has dignity. She survived so much, you guys.
Not to mention the romance on Rodney Dangerfield and Back to School, but that's another show.
Next week in this spot, as we do every few weeks or so, we are bringing back our show, Joe Townsell's Dread Time Stories. And Joe, what can you tell people about Graduation Day?
Well, as you can see from the book cover, it is from the original multi-author collection. It's one of my favorite stories from that collection, and I'm really looking forward to reading it for you. It's definitely different from the first two you've heard on Dread Time Stories. It's about a little bit of a graduation ceremony gone awry. We'll just say that much for now. And
would I be giving anything away by saying what you told me before the show, which is this one is a bit more science fiction than...
Not at all. We'll leave it at that, but yeah, I think you'll find less, there's always going to be some horror when you're talking about Joe Townsell writings.
Yes.
But really it's more thematically than graphically. And it's got a little bit of a sci-fi edge, I think, that people will enjoy.
Speaking of which, folks, joetownsell.com.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't mentioned our, well, it's not a sponsor. It's not a sponsor.
Can't say that.
We are not a sponsor.
And there's definitely gruesome, delightful horror in this upcoming collection. But there's also a little bit of science fiction here too. So I wanted to kind of mix it up for this collection.
Absolutely. And as Chris says, please, if you're watching us on Weber Internet Thingy on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It means the world to us.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And thank you for everybody for coming on tonight, and for the newer folks that popped by. Thank you so much, everybody.
Oh, we hope we see you again. Yeah. And yes, actually, you are correct, Raphael. I don't.
Oh, believe me, we'll be seeing that here momentarily.
Yeah, I don't want to cut this short. I want to give Townsell his full, 48 seconds.
But one thing we surprised with John with last time we showed this was not giving anything away, but this particular Rose theme and the character you see there is a running theme throughout the stories in Horror Springs Eternal. So
I love that. I didn't know that till last week, and I just love when you do that. Joe is a universe creator, and I love people who do that. This Thursday, so not tomorrow night, but the night right after.
Yeah.
I've got my old time radio show, Mr. Weber's Web O Mystery, where I play a old time mystery show, mystery, horror, suspense, detectives. We're going to be listening to Box 13 this week. It is a very, I think, underrated show, created by a very underrated actor, Alan Ladd. Did he create it? Well, he co-created it, and it's really an interesting story. So join me for that. I'll give you just a little bit of trivia, play the show for you, and it's always under an hour, and it's a great time. You're going to have a good time.
Always do. And if only I can get that Lionel Richie song out of my head, but I will.
Because you're going, fine. You got a beautiful mind. And Joe and I are back. We are hoping to announce our guest for this show soon. We're still trying to line that up. It's been a little hard for us to get guests because of the fires going on right now in our home state of California. A lot of our friends are out here. And Chris is saying the auto fire is getting closer. So our prayers to you too, Chris. You've been right in the middle of it for a long time. And it's dicey out here. I already lost 4 acres of avocados on my property.
That's a lot of guacamole.
Used to be able to tell people I was an avocado farmer. I can't say that now. I own several stumps.
But it'll all come back, John. And thank God for you and for people going through it now, that the least damage and of course the least risk to health and welfare. Prayers for all on that.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen, my friend.
Now, as we mentioned earlier, we used the phrase after dark. Well, here it is, our first Retro Rangers After Dark. Ooh.
There is a wealth of burlesque and striptease videos on YouTube. We are going to be visiting the days of burlesque and the great talents of these tremendous entertainers. I just get happy just looking at this graphic because I adore all these women. And of course, yes, we had to put Adrienne Barbeau in there. She did lots of really sexy stuff.
She did, this comes from the series Mod, and I don't think anyone's gonna this initially connect. But if you're afraid that this isn't using an older, could be previously used on Retro Rangers, it is a new clip of Adrienne Barbeau, not a one we've done before.
And I'm so excited for that because
who wouldn't be?
that woman is a goddess, and I've met her, and she's fantastic. I
did not know that.
I never told you I met her.
If you did, I don't think it would sit on my. No, you didn't tell me.
I did
remember that.
I didn't go overboard, but I just said, it's a real pleasure to meet you. We were at an audition, a voiceover audition, because she's got that gorgeous voice too.
Yeah,
and this was when she was 50 and pregnant with twins.
My goodness.
The woman's a goddess. I'm telling you. The fact that she was never Wonder Woman, I think, is a crime.
She should have been.
She should have been, baby. Could have totally pulled that off. All right. Where's the outro to this show? Okay. Thank you so much for watching this show. Thank you for everybody in the chat. We would love to see you come back and join us again. Mr. Townsell, you are the very best person in the world to work with. I'm the luckiest guy.
John, I'm going to dispute that. You're the second luckiest guy. I am the luckiest guy to be able to work with you, sir.
That's what it's all about here in Retro Trekkers. The love.
That's right. The love for Adrienne Barbeau.
At least.
Everybody,
good week. Your shift is over. Go to 10 forward, relax, and we will see you next week on Dread Time Stories at this time, 7 p.m. Tuesday night, where Joe will read his story to us, and I can't wait. It's going to be fantastic.
I think you'll really enjoy it. So I hope people stop by, and as always, we'll be requesting comments in detail. So please make it happen.
I'm so sorry. That was so awkward.
Oh. Those guys. Yes, get your gossip fun, everybody.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
Yeah. Well, I think for us, you will have a happy ending. Or resulted one.
Joe, I will see you soon. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you, John.
Damn arthritis. There we go.
There we go.